is this leather? And she looked at me and she said, no, but she added really quickly, it is the highest quality vinyl available. So, you know, I wasn't impressed by that. Should I have been impressed by that? It was highest quality vinyl. There is vinyl and there is vinyl, basically.
Yes.
So, yeah, I just think that people have got to start standing up and saying, we are not stupid, stop doing this.
What do you think? I just want to go back to politics and ask you about housing before we close. What do you think about the idea of the Electoral Commission going into a gang house to enrol the mongrel mob? I'm sure you know the story. And talkback callers say, why can't the mob get enrolled like everyone else? Dennis O'Reilly sees it differently.
If you're enjoying the benefits of a democracy, then you have some responsibilities in a democracy. And that responsibility is to obey the law.
Persuaded by that kind of argument?
I'm not.
In other words, if you include the mongrel mob and get them enrolled, as it were, in more ways than one.
I mean, I think it's a great initiative. I mean, for people who are ostracised and alienated and living on the fringe to become politically engaged, however they express it, would strike me as a move in the right direction.
I don't agree with it, and I think you're making assumptions. By going into a gang house and getting them to enrol and vote, are they politically engaged? Does the Electoral Commission go into retirement homes? Do they go into Rotary Club headquarters? So why are they doing this? I think they've got to be consistent with it. And, you know, I think the idea that going in and getting gang members to enrol and vote does not, as Dennis O'Reilly is sort of implying there, mean that they're going to start obeying the law. You can't pick and choose which laws you want to follow, surely.
Well, what are you afraid of?
Not afraid of anything. I just want consistency, and I think that
they were quite afraid of it.
Yeah, but one may say it's pandering to a criminal element. I mean, gangs and crime go together. So if you're going to do it for the mongrel mob, I'm not suggesting that retirement homes are the hotbed of crime. But what I'm saying is you've got to be consistent across the board. If you've got
do you know that they're inconsistent? Do you know that if a nursing home needed staff to come in to enrol people, that they wouldn't come in?
But did the Black Power ask the Electoral Commission to go in there, or is the Electoral Commission being proactive? And if they're being proactive there, why are they not being proactive with retirement homes and other club headquarters?
Well, they're not afraid to go into retirement homes, are they? There was an element of risk involved, an element of reticence because of the risk.
Yeah, isn't it their brief to extend the mandate as far as possible?
Well, are they doing it across the board then? Are they doing it across the board?
And there we have the 2 points of view on that one. Now, housing, not much time in a minute to discuss housing, but along with the devastating and, what was the other word? Dramatic.
Dramatic, yes.
Poll result tonight, there's a documentary about our housing issues on television. And National will double the Home Start House subsidy. The NBR says all such measures have ever done is drive up the cost of housing. Labor will make landlords put more heating and insulation into their homes. And the NBR predicts a major fall in house prices. What does this all suggest to you, the comparative failure seemingly of landlords, to make homes warmer and drier? Is it, in your view...
In 20 seconds...
the landlord's fault?
It's a lot of landlords' fault. Not all landlords, I'm sure.
I didn't mean to say everyone.
But I think we've reached the point where compulsion is the only answer.
And it is through compulsion because the law's changing. And I think it's you've got to put insulation in your house if it's practicable. So I don't know where Labor's coming from on this one, actually. It's already in law.
Ali Jones, Finlay McDonald have been on the panel. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Checkpoint with John Campbell now.
Tō te maira I hoa mai he kōrero ke te haere, he kaupapa ke te karawhiua. Kia ora, te reo Māori. Tonight, kitchen rubbish, syringes, soiled nappies, clothes covered in feces, blood and other bodily fluids, broken glass and broken light bulbs, even dead rats. That's what workers who sort items at recycling chain Save Mart have described finding amongst the clothing picked up from those blue Child Cancer Foundation charity bins, and they claim they're not allowed to wear gloves. Also tonight, Jacinda Ardern casts an early vote. Tensions rise as evacuees demand permission to return to their homes in Florida, and the Florida student who brought her horses inside to protect them from the weather, as you do.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon, ko Katrina Batanaho. Nationals leader Bill English has attacked Labour's proposed water tax, saying it could cost farmers up to $50,000 a year. Labour wants to charge farmers 1 or 2 cents for every 1,000 litres they use, but the details are yet to be hammered out. The party says that would cost dairy farmers just 1% or less of their revenue. But Mr English says it could be much more.
There's been a range of calculations, anything up to $10,000 to $50,000. The strongest argument against it is it's the wrong target. For instance, it won't be paid, apparently, in places where there's no irrigation. Well, there's still water quality issues in places where there's no irrigation.
Bill English. The Labour Party says National is scaremongering. Farmers are planning to protest in Labour leader Jacinda Ardern's hometown of Morrinsville on Monday. Nearly 40,000 people cast an early ballot yesterday when advance voting began for the election. That compares to the 50,000 who voted in the first 4 days of advance voting last election. There are 485 booths open across the country, including in shopping malls, libraries and the international departure lounges at Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch airports. The Electoral Commission is predicting half of all voters will cast their ballot before the election on September the 23rd. An addiction expert is warning there'll be more unexpected deaths of people using synthetic substances because doctors don't know how to treat them. A 21-year-old Fielding man is dead and 4 people have been treated in Palmerston North Hospital after taking synthetic drugs. Michael Crop reports.
The death, which has been referred to the coroner, follows 10 in Auckland in the last 2 months linked to the drugs. Richard Barris from Mid-Central District Health's Mental Health and Addiction Services says when users take synthetics, they become unpredictable and dangerous. And he says the toxic chemicals used in synthetics are not known and often change. Mr Barris says it is tragically likely that more people will die from using synthetic drugs. Call Michael Crop there, nay.
Tens of thousands of people have started returning to their shattered homes in Florida as remnants of Hurricane Irma push inland. 65% of the state is without power and city streets are underwater from Orlando and Jacksonville into coastal Georgia and South Carolina. Especially hard hit was the resort archipelago of the Florida Keys, which the state's governor, Rick Scott, says is devastated. While some evacuees from the Keys are angry over the authorities' refusal to allow them to return to their homes, the Defence Department says as many as 10,000 residents who had stayed put on the island may now be stranded and in need of evacuation. Several barbershops have been told by the police to stop giving their clients complimentary alcohol as part of their service. The shops, including a major men's chain, had been paid a visit by officers in recent weeks and warned it's illegal to give their customers alcohol because they don't have a liquor licence. The police say it's illegal to promote or advertise free alcohol and it's providing guidance to ensure shops comply. One Central Auckland barber says he's moved his beer fridge after being warned of the police interest by colleagues.
There's quiet outrage, but yeah, it's just a shame. It's a bloody shame. There must be a lot of other places that supply the occasional beer, particularly in barbering and in hairdressing, that will have to have a think about how they're going to do that.
The barber says it takes away part of going to a barbershop. GNS scientists have detected a series of slow or silent earthquakes of unprecedented scale triggered by the Kaikoura quake. New research shows November's magnitude 7.8 quake sparked the slow slips beneath the east coast of the North Island, spanning more than 15,000 square kilometres off Hawke's Bay and Gisborne. That's roughly the size of New Caledonia. Seismologist Yoshihiro Kaneko says unlike a normal earthquake where movement lasts seconds, a slow earthquake unfolds over weeks or months and faults move about 1 centimetre per day. He says it's the largest and most widespread episode of slow slip since scientists first recognised the phenomenon in 2002. The police in counties Manukau have adopted a te reo Māori on their police cars. They now feature the word pirihimana instead of police and koru designs. The initiative was launched to support Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori and the revitalisation of te reo. The Police Commissioner, Mike Bush, says being bilingual is a valuable skill for officers. It's 5 past 5. To sport, the move to high-tech monohulls for the next America's Cup is being tipped to attract more challengers. Team New Zealand has confirmed the move away from foiling catamarans, but is releasing few details before the end of the month. Commentator and former America's Cup sailor Peter Lester, who was based with the team for the Bermuda campaign, says a new formula will encourage more teams to compete.
This foiling monohull concept, it's certainly has been played with before this announcement, but now it'll go to another level because teams are going to come in there with a lot of funding and a lot of resource, and I think it's a massively exciting time for the America's Cup.
Peter Lester. The former New Zealand all-rounder Grant Elliott is satisfied with the security measures in place for the World's 11 2020 series against Pakistan, which begins in Lahore tonight. Because of security concerns, Pakistan's hosted very few international matches over the past couple of decades. The last time the Black Caps were there was in 2003. But Elliott has recent experience there, having played in the Pakistan Super League, and doesn't feel under threat.
I know a lot of the Pakistan guys now, and they've spoken quite passionately about how they want to play at home in front of their home crowd, which they don't get the luxury of doing. So obviously there's the security concerns about this, and you look at the relevant information that's given to us, and then you assess it and make a decision with your family.
Grant Elliott. That's the news.
Pushing up the benefits.
I want to put $60 a week extra into those households, $9,000 over the course of that lifetime.
Pushing down fees.
We're looking at the possibility of free accommodation for those that might be eligible for the free fees.
And pushing out the waka.
One MP can't do it. We need 3 MPs. We need everyone. We need the community.
Pushing buttons. Guy and Espiner and Susie Ferguson. Morning Report, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, why New Zealanders need to pay more attention to their credit history records. And after 10, Maggie O'Farrell on her 17 brushes with death. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland through Taranaki, including Coromandel and the Central High Country. A few showers turning to widespread rain from Auckland southwards later tomorrow, possibly heavy in the west. Bay of Plenty, cloudy periods, isolated showers becoming widespread tomorrow evening. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mostly fine, however cloud increasing later tomorrow with scattered evening rain. Whanganui to Wellington, also wide at upper, isolated showers turning to widespread rain for a time tomorrow afternoon or evening. Nelson and Marlborough except the Kaikoura coast, fine today, scattered rain tomorrow afternoon or evening. Kaikoura coast, Canterbury, Otago and Southland, cloudy periods and scattered showers. Bulla to Fiordland, isolated showers, turning to widespread rain tomorrow, possibly heavy. And the Chatham Islands, cloudy with occasional showers, possibly heavy today with hail. It's 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being with us. Coming up next on the program, Jacinda Ardern votes. Bill English campaigns on water. That sounds biblical. We have the latest from the campaign trail. What happened after our school lunchbox comparison on Friday night? Zach Fleming has gone to find out. And Australia is asked, should the law be changed to allow same-sex couples to marry? All of that coming up. But we begin tonight with Save Mart. Some of you will know them. Some of you will have shopped with them. Many of you may have donated clothes to them, perhaps without even knowing it. Save Mart are behind the blue bins that are in many neighbourhoods in New Zealand where you can deposit clothes you no longer need. As you do so, you'll see the Child Cancer Foundation sticker and the promise this recycling project helps with cancer. It does indeed. Save Mart indisputably donates some of the proceeds of the clothing people put in those blue bins to the Child Cancer Foundation. What percentage of their revenue that is isn't known. However, recipients like the Child Cancer Foundation and other charities are very grateful for it. But Save Mart is also a business, and some of what goes into those bins is sold for their profit. Again, the split isn't public. Many of the staff earn the minimum wage. They're certainly not alone in that. And while they'd love a pay rise, most of all what they'd love is better protection from some of the stuff people are dumping in those bins. We've disguised voices to protect the identity of Save Mart workers. What's your job?
I'm a sorter, so what it is that all the bales, they get brought in from the outside bins, and our job description is to empty out the bins and select the best products that they can resell.
This is a story that begins with the famous blue clothing bins with child cancer written on the side of them. Many people will have put clothing into them. Some people have put in other things too.
Yeah, hospital clothing that's got blood stains on it.
We'll call that person worker number 1 and this person worker number 2.
A lot of dead rats.
Sorry, did you just say dead rats?
Yeah, dead rats.
We've altered their voices because they're scared they'll lose their jobs. Any job is better than none at all, even if this is what's amongst the clothing. And we'll call this person worker number 3.
Kitchen rubbish, rubbish from the garden, broken glasses, like nappies with ships, and all like what you're thinking, all the ships ones. Yeah, and even syringes, broken bulbs, you know.
Kitchen rubbish, garden rubbish, soiled nappies, broken glass and broken light bulbs, feces, blood and other body fluids.
And needles, used needles.
None of which would be such an issue if they didn't have to work with bare hands. Are you given gloves?
No, we've never been given gloves.
That's worker 1, but they all say the same thing. Is worker 3 or any of her colleagues wearing gloves?
No, we're not.
Here's worker 1 again.
When I first started, I thought, oh, cool, you know, we're allowed to wear gloves. No. So what we normally do is, like, if we see something, because you've got to really watch what you're picking up. You know, if there's a clean towel around there, we'll just pick it up with that, and then, you know, so we're not touching it.
And so not only are you not given gloves, have you been told, explicitly told you are not allowed to wear them?
Yes. Yes.
Worker 2, the same question. Are you allowed to wear gloves?
No, not at all. We've been told we're not allowed gloves. I've questioned them about it.
So why not? Why the bare hands?
Because we don't feel the condition of the clothes if we wear gloves. Like if the clothes damp from, you know, if it's dry.
Workers we spoke to, both on the record and off it, all told us the same thing. Wearing gloves means you're less well able to assess whether the material's dry or wet, good or bad. And they're told that explicitly. Here's worker 3 again, talking about instructions from a manager.
She said, like, we can't feel the clothing if it's wet or dry.
All the workers we spoke to told us the same thing. No gloves, full stop.
You've got used vibrators, you've got cockroaches. I've come across a dead mice once in my time. Everything in a household that's just thrown into these bales. And no gloves are provided. When I first started, they said to us we weren't allowed to wear these gloves because we can't feel whether the clothing is wet.
And they told us if they complain or agitate or campaign for change, they get a very simple message from their manager.
If you not do what I said, here's the door. You're out. I did question it in the beginning. You know, oh, that's a health and safety issue, you know, and obviously they're going to threaten you, well, if you don't like it, there's the door.
What does Save Mart say in response to all of this? The company's owner is Tom Doonan. Last night we phoned him.
Hello.
G'day, it's John Campbell from Radio New Zealand. I'm after Thomas if he's around. Is that Thomas? Thomas, it's John Campbell from Radio New Zealand. That may have been confusion, of course. I called him Thomas. He calls himself Tom. He may have thought I had the wrong person. So our producer, Bridget Burke, called him back a few minutes later. That was roughly 7 o'clock last night. This morning at 6:38, he phoned her back. He doesn't give interviews, he said. He invited us to email him questions, which we did at 9:53 this morning. He sent us a short reply this afternoon stating gloves are available if required, and that, and I quote, everything is pre-sorted before it goes to the sorter. A lot of what we handle comes from charity shops. Tom Doonan again declined our request to be interviewed. But we're not the first organisation to raise such concerns with him. First Union did something similar 5 months ago.
We drafted a legal letter to the company on 27th of April of this year, citing what the key areas of concerns were for us, and we wanted to have a meeting and go through that. I had no response from the company on that at all. I went back again on the 9th of June and hand-delivered to Grant Doonan, who was the son of the owner of the company, the legal letter again, and also some legal letters for the initiation of bargaining for a collective agreement. I've since then gone through a number of email exchanges to the company, of which I've had no response. I finally got a response back by fax saying that the company has blocked my email, so that limited my ability to get any form of communication.
That's Graham McKean, First Union organiser, who's now representing some of Save Mart's workers, or attempting to. He provided us with photos the workers have taken. They're not allowed to photograph what they're sorting and risk their jobs by doing so, but some have managed to. The photos clearly show broken glass and the jagged edge of a broken clock face, broken crockery, and, just a warning, if you're watching and you're squeamish, we're about to show you soiled underpants. Do look away. They're in the midst of other clothes, and it is a pretty unpleasant thing to contemplate touching without gloves. The photo's gone now. There's also video footage as the workers go through the clothing, but it identifies individual workers, so we are not using it. First Union's Graham McKean says whilst they'd like a pay rise from the minimum wage, what they're after, first and foremost, is health and safety protections. And how are they going with that?
There's been no response at all. So I have sent through several letters, several emails. I've visited the site several times, including going to the main office and meeting with Tom's son, only to no avail. There's been no response on any of those key point issues that we've sent through.
Save Mart does appear to be a real success story. Its website lists 31 stores in New Zealand. At New Lynn today, a big shop in West Auckland where the sorters are also based, there were thousands of garments on sale, many of them from those blue bins that lots of us will recognise. A percentage of the proceeds does indeed go to the Child Cancer Foundation and also to other charities, and they are very grateful for it. We do not know what percentage of Save Mart's revenue this is. The union began its approaches in April. In his email to us today, Tom Doonan said they are in the process of restructuring the New Lynn operation, also starting in April. Staff claim they have not received formal notification of this. But with the union effectively getting little or no response and the workers reportedly under restructure, the question is, what do they do to ensure their own health and safety?
I had actually asked him that the other day, the owner of the store. I said to him, well, who can I speak to if you've got no human resources? I'd like to, I can't go to management. Is there somebody there that I can speak to voice my opinion and our concerns? No direct answer.
It's one of the workers that sorts the clothing that goes into those bins along with a whole lot of other stuff. We want to stress that while some of the proceeds of the sale of those clothes goes to the Child Cancer Foundation and they are grateful for it, they do not run the bins. They are in fact run by Save Mart. We would be delighted if anyone from Save Mart or able to speak on their behalf could join us on Checkpoint in the next hour and 15 minutes or so. Let's turn to the campaign trail now. The Labour leader has foregone the traditional election day voting op. Photo op of them voting. A staple of the 6 p.m. news on election day ever since there was a 6 p.m. news. Casting her ballot today in a bid to encourage the party's supporters to follow suit. Jacinda Ardern voted early at a polling booth in a community hall in her Mount Albert electorate in Auckland just a day after the polls opened for early voting. Earlier she unveiled Labour's plans to boost film and public broadcasting by $38 million a year, including launching a form of free-to-air non-commercial television. Here's our political reporter, Demelza Leslie.
Traditionally, party leaders make a big deal of voting in their electorates on election day, but Jacinda Ardern is keen to highlight the importance of early voting and to boost turnout.
More than 27,000 people in the last election cast a vote that didn't count, in part because people can sometimes vote believing they're enrolled, but they weren't. So we want to make sure that if you want to remove any error, make sure you vote early.
So what will Ms Ardern do on election day instead? She openly discussed this with her partner, Clark Gayford, who came with her to the polling station.
Maybe I'll have an extra cup of tea at home, go and see some volunteers. Maybe I'll do some chores for a change.
We haven't finished painting the fence yet, so...
Maybe I'll paint the fence on election day. Yep.
Advanced voting booths opened yesterday morning and already nearly 40,000 votes have been cast. The booths are located in shopping malls, supermarkets and at departure lounges at Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch airports. A woman who stopped Jacinda Ardern on her way out of the community hall in Mount Albert spoke of how easy it is to vote now.
It's lovely to be able to do voting in the shopping mall.
Oh, great! So that's where you did it, isn't it great?
Yeah, and don't have to rush on.
Yeah, awesome. Oh, glad you did.
I've never seen it in the mall before.
Awesome,
Yes.
That's as it should be. Nice and
I went
easy.
home and told my son, get down there, it's in the mall.
Good on you. And did he?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yes, and there were no lines.
Oh, that's great. Oh, thank you. Take care.
The Electoral Commission believes as many as half of all the votes cast will be in advance of election day. Earlier in the day, Ms Ardern visited Auckland Film Studios in Henderson, where she unveiled a $38 million annual boost for the film industry and public broadcasting. Labour wants to create a new public digital media service built around RNZ, including a free-to-air, non-commercial television service. That service would be called RNZ Plus.
Well, at the moment they're doing some broadcasting, but we see that certainly being expanded. We'll allow them to work out whether or not that's a 24/7 program.
Labour would create a new public media funding commissioner who would decide how the money would be allocated. Jacinda Ardern says that commissioner would be independent from political influence. The Coalition for Better Broadcasting's chair, Peter Thompson, likes that Labour's policy is focused on public broadcasting.
We know at the moment that it's very, very difficult for independent producers to get content on Television New Zealand or TV3 unless it already fits their commercial schedules. They routinely say no to a wide range of programs that might be culturally or democratically useful, but which they don't think is going to generate the ratings that they need, particularly for prime time.
Nationals leader Bill English says he doesn't understand why Labour is planning the new initiative and says the country is already well served by existing media outlets like RNZ and Māori television. Labour's policy includes working with Auckland Council to ensure it upgrades film studio infrastructure. A film industry worker, Phil Gregory, says he's been fighting the council to keep the Auckland film studios alive.
It just seems mad to me that an asset that's already owned by the council is going to slip through our fingers and potentially be turned into housing. That's fine. Housing, there's pressure on that in Auckland, but they're not going to be developing this area for another 10 years. The thing is, the overseas film industry is worth nearly $1 billion to the Auckland city area per year. So it's a huge industry and really it just needs some support.
There are less than 11 days until the election, and with many people choosing to vote early, it will put pressure on the main political parties to show all of their cards for spending promises sooner rather than later. In Auckland for Checkpoint, Demelza Leslie.
Bill English spent the day hammering away on Labour's plans for a water tax and talking up the risks of the party renegotiating export deals if it takes power after the election. The National leader opened the Justice and Emergency Precinct in Christchurch this morning before moving on to campaign in rural mid-Canterbury, which is a National Party stronghold. Sarah Robson has more.
About 200 people turned out to hear Bill English speak at a meeting in Ashburton, organised by Irrigation New Zealand. He says there's a clear choice for voters between National and Labour when it comes to tax.
It's a pretty simple contrast. You either vote National, where you know what the tax rules are, or you vote for a committee that will decide eventually.
Bill English says Labour's plans to introduce royalties on bottled and irrigated water and bring agriculture into the emissions trading scheme will be bad news for the regions.
That will be cash sucked out of your business, taken out of this region, sent off to Wellington, and people who don't even know what you do or how you do it will be deciding how to make you do it better.
And the locals are worried too. The Vice President of Mid-Canterbury Federated Farmers, David Clark, says Labour's tax proposals will hit farmers and rural communities hard.
If we get all these taxes that are being proposed on our business, we're a small family-owned business, and now we go from being modestly profitable and sustainable in the long run to a loss-making business.
Beef farmer Bruce Alexander thinks Labor's plans are absolute rubbish.
This is just a sop to the urban people to gain votes by the Labor Party. Absolutely.
But Labor is defending its position, saying it will work with the agricultural sector around the implementation of the water tax, and the revenue that would be raised is needed to help clean up the waterways. National is also warning that the primary sector could be impacted by Labor leader Jacinda Ardern's signal that she'd look to renegotiate the country's free trade agreement with South Korea to stop foreigners buying existing homes.
Australia signed a deal with that carve-out. Korea signed a deal with that carve-out. New Zealand should have asked for that carve-out. The government didn't. We will.
Jacinda Ardern acknowledges the importance of the deal to exporters, but says farmers shouldn't be worried. But Bill English says Ms Ardern's comments are irresponsible, given South Korea is New Zealand's 6th largest export market.
Jobs in every region in New Zealand have benefited from that trade agreement. Hard won. It's an important part of maintaining New Zealand's reputation as supporting trade, and I can't understand how Labor can say they worry about the regions and now want to tear up the most recent trade agreement that has been a big benefit to our region.
On Monday, farmers will protest in Jacinda Ardern's hometown of Morrinsville. They say they are frustrated with continued attacks on rural New Zealand, saying farmers are not punching bags for urban politicians. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Sarah Robson, aho.
Lots of feedback coming in already with the time of 5:26, including from former Save Mart employees. I worked for Save Mart in their sorting warehouse over 15 years ago, and it was disgusting. Every time I reached into the wool bale bag, I feared being pricked by a needle. We had no gloves, aprons or protective gear. They wrote down what we wore when we went into the warehouse and checked what we were wearing on the way out. I remember handling bloody undies. I can't believe it hasn't changed in all that time. The dressing rooms are also filthy. That's from one person, and the dressing rooms are also filthy at Save Mart. Every single branch, no customer toilets either, leaking roofs, soggy floors, etc. Poor staff, awful work environments. Lots of people contacting us. Some stuff we'll need to verify before we read it on air, but thank you. If you have feedback, text us 2101 or email us checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Let's go to Florida now, where there's growing tension between residents displaced by Hurricane Irma in huge numbers and officials over whether it's safe for them to return home. Angry residents, desperate to see the damage to their homes, gathered at a police checkpoint demanding permission to return to Key Largo. But authorities maintain the roads are still unsafe. Historic storm surges continue and winds cutting power to almost 7 million homes. Bridget Burke reports.
Reality dawns in the aftermath of Hurricane Irma. After causing chaos across the Caribbean, the monster storm was eventually reduced to a tropical cyclone, but not before wreaking havoc across the Florida Keys and cutting power to almost 7 million homes. The White House Homeland Security Advisor Tom Bossett warning of a long recovery.
We could have power down in homes for the coming weeks. The Keys are going to take a while. We have not assessed the structural integrity of the bridges there. There's some early reason to believe that some of the drawbridges that were up may or may not have been bent. And so restoring those is going to take some time. That Route 1 is a large, expansive bridge, essentially. All of the undergirding there has to be examined for structural integrity. I would expect that the Keys are not fit for re-entry for regular citizenry for weeks.
Florida's Governor Rick Scott described the fallout across the state and a storm surge in some areas unlike any on record.
Storm surge across South and Southwest Florida ranged from 4 to 8 feet. Monroe County experienced an estimated 10 feet of surge at landfall. Miami-Dade experienced approximately 4 feet of storm surge. What's interesting about the storm surge is this is totally different than Andrew. A lot of us remember Andrew, and we didn't see the storm surge in Andrew. It was more of a wind event. In Tampa, we're seeing 2 to 4 feet of storm surge right now, and this will last throughout today. In Central Florida, in the Orlando area, we're seeing flooding due to a torrential rain of more than a foot. In Jacksonville and Northeast Florida, storm surge is 3 to 5 feet on top of more than a foot of rainfall, which is causing record and historical flooding along the St. Johns River. We still saw a lot of flood damage, and from talking to the officials down in the Keys, the water is not working, the sewer is not working, and there's no electricity. So it's very tough.
While Irma has claimed at least 42 lives across the Caribbean and the United States, Mr Scott warned the toll could rise once officials assessed the damage in the Keys.
My heart goes out to the people in the Keys. I mean, there's devastation. And you know, I just hope everybody you know, survived. It's horrible what we saw. I know for our entire state, but especially for the Keys, it's going to be a long road. There's a lot of damage.
And while the damage temporarily closed roads, tempers flared as evacuees who are desperate to return to their homes remain stranded with no fuel.
There is no gasoline, sir. We can't go to shelters. There's no gasoline. There's no gasoline anywhere. We're in a predicament. I live 20 miles from here. 20 miles from here. There's no shelter. I have water. I have food. I have dogs. And I can't get to my house.
This should have been thought out
20
a while
miles
ago.
away. I live 20 miles away.
Next time I'm staying in Key Largo. I'm not leaving Key Largo. The fake media is just panicking everybody to get him out of there, and then you can't go in. There's nothing wrong with the roads to Key Largo.
You guys are trying to talk to the media. You didn't even talk to anybody standing here.
We're listening.
We're listening. What are we listening to? What are they listening over there?
We need to go check out our property.
Right,
okay, so next time then we need to stay so that
let's allow them time to continue doing.
The roads are fine to Key Largo.
And whilst Miami was spared the brunt of Irma, it was little consolation to some of the estimated 850,000 people who live in mobile homes. Just a third are believed to have been built to code to withstand a hurricane like Irma. Melinda Hernandez is just one of thousands who've lost their homes.
You know, I want to cry, But I say God hands everything. What happened? Yes, I come. I try to make everything clean, you know. This is what it is. This is life, you know.
Life was good for horses, Goose and Dixie in the city of Okeechobee. The horses rode out the storm inside owner Tatum Fisher's house, who converted the laundry into a makeshift stable.
We got no power. We lost all our power about an hour ago. And the horses are just fine. And here's Mr. Goose and Dixie. And they're happy as can be in here, eating their hay. They don't mind the storm whatsoever.
Meanwhile, in Cuba, after packing winds of more than 320 kilometres an hour across the island's northern coast, 10 people were electrocuted and killed by collapsing buildings. Now the clean-up has begun. Many streets in central Havana are still being inundated by waist-high floodwater, and 80% of the country is without power, with some regions being warned it may take up to 20 days for electricity supplies to be fully restored. And across the Caribbean islands, evacuations continued. This aerial footage showing the utter devastation Irma brought to the part Dutch, part French island of Saint-Martin. 4 days after Irma claimed at least 5 lives and destroyed homes, tourists stood at the once famous Princess Juliana International Airport for flights that would finally take them home. At least 1,200 American tourists were taken by a Royal Caribbean cruise ship to Puerto Rico, whilst others were flown by the Air Force to the island of Curaçao and then on to the Netherlands. For Checkpoint, Bridget Burke.
Coming up on Checkpoint Wide, the future of Team New Zealand racing will be high-tech monohulls. Goodbye, cats. Mounting pressure on Myanmar to end what's being called ethnic cleansing. Some good news for Kingsford Primary School after it was revealed on Friday up to half the school's pupils arrive at school with no lunch. Known as Next with Business. Lots of people asking where Katrina is tonight. Regular viewers, hi Paul. Well, Katrina Batten is in fact in Wellington. Hi Katrina, but you've still got the headlines, right?
I still have the headlines, which I'll present to you now.
Thank you.
Nationals leader Bill English has attacked Labour's proposed water tax, saying it could cost farmers up to $50,000 a year. Labour wants to charge farmers 1 or 2 cents for every 1,000 litres they use, but the details are yet to be hammered out. The party says that would cost dairy farmers just 1% or less of their revenue, but Mr English says it could be much more. Nearly 40,000 people cast an early ballot yesterday when advance voting began for the election. That compares to the 50,000 who voted in the first 4 days of advance voting last election. An addiction expert is warning there'll be more unexpected deaths of people using synthetic substances because doctors don't know how to treat them. A 21-year-old Fielding man is dead and 4 people have been treated in Palmerston North Hospital after taking synthetic drugs, and 10 deaths in Auckland in the past 2 months have been linked to synthetic substances. 6 million homes in Florida, 2/3 of the total, are without power after Hurricane Irma cut a deadly path through the state. Relief operations are underway and engineers are working to restore power, but many areas remain underwater. 4 deaths have been linked to Irma in Florida and up to 40 in the Caribbean. Several barbershops have been told by the police to stop giving their clients complimentary alcohol as part of their service. The shops, including a major chain, have been paid a visit by officers in recent weeks and warned it's illegal to give their customers alcohol because they don't have a liquor licence. GNS scientists have detected a series of slow or silent earthquakes of unprecedented scale triggered by the Kaikoura quake. New research shows November's magnitude 7.8 quake sparked the slow slips beneath the east coast of the North Island, spanning more than 15,000 square kilometres off Hawke's Bay and Gisborne. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
Thank you very much, Katrina Batten from Wellington. Let's turn to business news now with Nona Peltier, who's beside me in Auckland. Someone emailed in last night and said, why is Nona always on such a crappy phone line? Well, you're sitting next to me. So I have no idea.
I'm so sorry about that. It must be...
I don't know what it is. Oh. I don't know. You've mic'd up and everything. It's lovely to have you here. Retirement village and aged care provider Arvida has gone on a spending spree. What did they buy, Nona?
They bought 3 retirement villages. So they bought them from a company they'd done business with in the past, and Hearst Life Care is their name. And they spent $160 million.
Holy moly.
It's a lot of money. They bought Mary Doyle in Havelock North and Strathhallen in Timaru, and half of the park in the village, or at the village, in Wellington. And it offers them a lot of development potential as well, and it's profitable, and yeah, it's the way of the future. They're going to continue to look for villages that they can acquire. It's part of their growth strategy, and yes, bigger, better. And these days, the small standalone aged care centres and small communities, their days are numbered.
Wow, this is big business now,
yeah,
isn't it?
It's a big business now. And of course, all retirement villages, not all, but in the future, aged care facilities will be incorporated into those. And that's what we're seeing as a trend.
Right. See, the New Zealand Institute of Economic Research has got some opinions about clamping down on foreign investment and migration.
Yes.
Are you going to talk about that?
Yeah, why not? The Deputy Chief Executive of the NZIER, the Institute of Economic Research, John Ballingall, he offered his opinion when asked about what he thought of, putting restrictions on foreign investment. He didn't think that was a very good idea. We already have a lot of regulations that cover that, and putting on more isn't a really great plan because New Zealand we're poor savers. We don't save our money. And so because we don't save enough, we really need foreign investment to kind of fill up the gap. And if we start saying, well, we're going to limit that, put on restrictions, it doesn't really help our economy because we're not going to make up the difference. And on the subject of migrants, immigration, he had a similar view. He said, why are we leaving it up to a bureaucrat to decide what migrants we need and what migrants we don't need? We do need migration. It's part of the whole picture. And that was his opinion.
So who was that from the NZIER?
The Deputy Chief Executive, John Ballingall.
Wading into it just prior to the election.
Yeah, so that was their opinion. Yeah. And, but I mean, some of these things, as opinion, other things are fact. And the fact is we aren't very good savers.
No, we're not very good savers. People will be listening and saying, I'd love to be able to save more, but
yes,
I'm
not a very good
trying
saver.
to stay afloat in Auckland. No, what happened on the markets today?
Well, it fell a little bit. So yesterday it was steady, unchanged from the day from Friday, as a matter of fact. We're, just 11 points down to 7,840. That's still pretty darn high, though. And the dollar was steady at 72.3 US cents and 90.2 Australian and 54.8 pence.
Nona Peltier, thank you very much indeed. Another piece of the America's Cup jigsaw is in place, with Team New Zealand confirming the catamaran is dead and the future is high-tech monohulls. The team's plan was revealed after it was leaked in Italy by Patrizio Bertelli, the head of the challenging team, which is helping make the new rules. Our America's Cup correspondent Todd Niles says while the Cats were spectacular, their days were numbered.
The winner of the 35th America's Cup, Emirates Team New Zealand!
To the victor belong the spoils, and in the America's Cup that means hosting the next defence and deciding the rules. Team New Zealand hasn't said much about its thinking, but boss Grant Dalton hinted the foiling catamaran was history upon winning the Cup in Bermuda back in June.
We have some ideas, we have some plans. We want to do the right thing. I think it's important that we don't take away from the yachting aspect of it. It's still a race of yachtsmen. And I think just, pumping oil around a boat isn't necessarily yachting in one sense.
The catamarans were fragile, working well in Bermuda's lagoon, but considered wrong for the windier conditions in Auckland and too expensive. The rules for 2021 are being drawn up in conjunction with Italy's Luna Rossa, a team that's partnered with the New Zealanders in the past 2 America's Cups. The Italians' clear preference for monohulls has won through, and commentator Peter Lester, who spent the Bermuda Cup inside Team New Zealand, agrees.
This foiling monohull concept, it's certainly has been played with before this announcement, but now it'll go to another level because teams are going to come in there with a lot of funding and a lot of resource. And I think it's a massively exciting time for the America's Cup.
Large racing monohulls are now following catamarans and being designed to ride on foils. Former America's Cup skipper Chris Dixon expects Team New Zealand will be as innovative with the new class of boat as it has been with previous ones.
They were a new catamaran design, and Team New Zealand did a better job than everyone else on a new class in Bermuda, and arguably they almost did a better job of it with a new class in San Francisco before that. So Team New Zealand seemed very skilled at taking a new design of boat, a new type of boat, and figuring out what makes it go fast and doing a better job at it than everyone else.
Peter Lester concedes the team will lose the advantage of their clear lead in catamaran design.
What they don't give away, of course, is the process of how they came up with a solution around that rule. And that same formula will apply to any new boat.
Peter Lester says with the monohull class being new for all competitors, it should be considered more open and attract a bigger field of challengers than the 3 to 5 which contested the past 2 Cups.
I mean, if we think back to when the Cup was in Auckland, I think the number was 10 or 11 challengers. And that's the number that I'm sure, or a number like that Emirates Team New Zealand and Luna Rossa, as the challenger record, would like to attract to the next America's Cup.
Team New Zealand is saying nothing more until later this month, when it's expected to reveal full details of the new boat, the regatta and other rules. The slim details available today aren't enough yet to help planners work out how big the team bases need to be in Auckland or where they might be located. I Tamaki Makoro mo te hotaka o te ahiahi ko Todd Nile tēnei.
A nurse has told an inquest she was overwhelmed and stressed the night an Auckland woman died in suspicious circumstances. Heather Bills died in Middlemore Hospital in 2013, 6 weeks after she was badly burned in an explosive fire at her Orake home. The 64-year-old suffered an irreversible brain injury after being given a large dose of insulin. Sally Murphy reports.
Registered nurse Harmeet Soshi, who was responsible for Heather Bill's care the night that she deteriorated, broke down in tears on the stand as she recalled what happened.
Since that shift, I have spoken with other staff and my husband about the events that unfolded with Heather that night, as it was such a shock to see Heather like this. I was very scared. So much was going on in so little time that it made me shake in the end. I am still shaken by this event.
Miss Soshi told the court at the start of her shift after a handover she went to check on Miss Bills, who she'd looked after before. She told the inquest before she even got to the room she could hear numerous machines beeping.
I found that Sharon, the watch, seemed oblivious to the fact that 3 of the machines were beeping. Both Sharon and Heather appeared unmoved. I have to say that I was a little perplexed that Sharon appeared oblivious to the loud beeping of the pumps.
Harmeet Soshi said everything seemed fine until later that night when Miss Bill's heart rate rose, she was sweating and moaning in pain. Miss Soshi told the inquest she did tests and gave Miss Bills more oxygen before calling the doctor. But by the time the doctor had arrived, she'd been called to another incident on the ward.
I was in a turmoil and didn't know what to do next. Heather was getting sicker and the other patient was having a panic attack, and I had a nurse inexperienced with burns looking after her.
The coroner's inquest is to determine the cause of Heather Bill's sudden deterioration and if it was caused by insulin, where it came from and who administered it. Under cross-examination by Miss Bill's daughter, Michelle Ma, Miss Soshi admitted the ward was understaffed that night because the other head nurse had called in sick and the replacement nurse had little burns unit experience. Miss Ma asked Miss Soshi if her mother could have been given insulin by accident, to which she answered no.
We've heard from experts over this last week. They've said that Mum was injected with insulin. There's no other plausible way of her deterioration. And you had very close contact with Mum. You were her primary care nurse. Did you administer insulin to her?
No.
Miss Soshi said she has no idea how Miss Bills ended up with such a large dose of insulin in her body. 31 people are giving evidence at the inquest, which is set down until Friday. At the Auckland District Court for Checkpoint, Sally Murphy.
Coming up to 14 minutes to 6. We've had a striking response to our story on Friday about school lunches. You'll remember we conducted a very simple social experiment with no parental warning so that reality couldn't be altered in any way. We visited a Decile 1 and a Decile 10 school to see what the children were having for lunch. What we found was that more than half of Room 3 at Mangari's Kingsford Primary, 15 children, didn't have anything to eat. No morning tea, no lunch, nothing. Now that shocked many of you, judging from your feedback and the number of viewings the story's had. Over 200,000 viewings on our Facebook page alone since it went to air. And also the response the charity Kids Can received. Here's Zach Fleming to explain.
A special delivery, thanks entirely to public generosity. On Friday, we told the story of lunchtime at Kingsford Primary in Mangere, a Decile 1 school. We compared a class there to a class at a Decile 10 school, where 100% of the kids had a nutritious, packed lunch. Here's what we found at Kingsford.
26 children will learn here today.
But on 15 of the desks, more than half,
where there should be food, there is instead nothing. And for some of the children in this class, lunch today consists of just a single cookie or a lone bag of chips. Being in this classroom, the difference between a Decile 1 and 10 is startling. It almost leaves you speechless. On this group of desks, 6 children sit here, but only one of them brought food today.
This child's morning tea and lunch is a single bag of chips. Over here, chips and biscuits. Out of 26 children, just 4 have an actual lunchbox that's full.
And you'll remember at the Decile 10 school, 4/5 of the classroom brought fresh fruit. In this classroom, these 2 lunchboxes out of the total 26 are the only ones that brought fruit today.
Principal of Kingsford Primary, Chris Williams, says this is reality.
That's normal, everyday, run-of-the-mill, that's same every day.
In the 3 days since, several businesses have come forward offering Kids Can help, and more than 125 children have been sponsored. Averaged over a year, that works out to more than $20,000. As a direct result of those donations, Kids Can's been able to provide Kingsford Primary enough food to last till the end of this term and the first week of next term. Then after that, they're fully signed up online and they can order as much food and essentials as they need going forward.
And so we have got 2 cars full of food here today, and 2 cars, yes, and we would like very much your help to unload it if you're happy to do that. Are you guys happy to do that? Yes!
2 full carloads emptied by 6 eager helpers. Today's delivery means children at Kingsford won't go without lunch anymore.
Oh no, it's too heavy for me.
And here all the food is. I've got the packing slip from Kids Can in front of me, and we've got 276 big cans of baked beans, more than 2,000 individual Scroggin mixes, more than 2,000 packs of muesli bars. We've got Easy Yo yogurt machines with the Easy Yo yogurt, more than 30 loaves of bread, and the healthy options for the spreads. We've got low sugar jam and no added salt or sugar peanut butter. Just what these kids need for a healthy, nutritious breakfast and lunch for a day of learning.
We had one person come in just off the street, just drove into the school and just said, I saw the programme about your school and I'd like to donate, and just give us a whole bag full of food. You know, it's just things like that, just being blown away by the kindness and generosity of people.
On Friday, Principal Chris Williams estimated half of his 300-strong school roll came to school without lunch. He says today's delivery will make an immediate difference.
Well, it'll make a huge difference to the children. They'll be in school, they'll be fed, they'll be able to concentrate more, they'll be able to concentrate on their learning, and they'll be happier.
But feedback wasn't all positive. Of the hundreds of comments left on Checkpoint's Facebook page, many laid blame solely on parents and questioned why feeding hungry children was the government's problem to deal with.
If you can't afford to feed and clothe your kids, stop breeding.
Oh, please. Now we have to feed other people's children?
Useless parents, that's all. Too lazy, spent money on alcohol, drugs, blah, blah, blah. It's not hard to put warm clothes and shoes on a child, give them a lovely brekkie and pack a nice filling lunch for them.
I cannot believe how judgmental some people are in this country. This is about the children. It's not about judging the parents who are doing, in most cases, the best that they can for their children. And I think people need to really wake up and take a good look at themselves, because in my world, it's not okay for children to go hungry.
That's Julie Chapman, Kids Can's CEO.
I've worked in this organisation for 12 years. I know that it is not all parents that are doing the wrong thing. And when you've got, you know, in the case of this school, up to 150 children coming hungry, you cannot tar all the parents with that brush. Most of them are doing the best they can with what they have.
I was talking to Julie in the teacher's staff room where the food shipment was taken. As you heard, she was outraged by many of the comments, but I wanted to know if she was surprised.
It wasn't surprising that...
But before she could finish answering, a teacher walked in.
Holy moly! Oh my...
Overwhelmed by the support. There are 33 schools like Kingsford Primary on Kids Can's waiting list, because the charity doesn't yet have enough money to help everyone that needs it.
We're working on a business case at the moment to put forward to Oranga Tamariki to increase our programs for next year. So we're hoping that that business case will be accepted by Treasury, and hopefully we'll be able to get even more support to kids waiting across New Zealand.
Kids Can estimates there are around 50,000 children leaving home every day in New Zealand without lunch. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
Zach Fleming, the reporter, of course, Bradley White, the cameraman, both today and in the original story on Friday. 8 minutes to 6. It's a situation that now has been described as a textbook case of ethnic cleansing. The exodus of Rohingya Muslims from Myanmar into Bangladesh and the developing humanitarian crisis on the border. The UN is calling on Myanmar to end its military operation in Rakhine State, while Sweden and Britain are calling for a special UN Security Council meeting on the worsening situation. The ABC's Anne Barker filed this report.
Another boatload of Rohingya Muslims flee across the border to Bangladesh. And as they cross the Naf River, they watch their villages burn behind them. They shoot us, kill us and burn our houses, says this woman, Feroza Begum. We've come here out of fear. Myanmar's military has been accused of waging arson attacks to force the minority Rohingyas out. And now there's mounting evidence of landmines deliberately laid in their path. Hospitals in Bangladesh have been overwhelmed by the number of Rohingya casualties, burns, gunshot wounds and now limbs blown off by landmines. This 15-year-old boy has lost both his legs and is unlikely to survive. His brother has similar injuries in another hospital. Their mother, Rashida Haq, is grief-stricken.
They had already gone ahead and I was behind them. And that's when the explosion happened. We'd been fired on, shot at, and they planted mines. We have escaped to Bangladesh because we have nowhere else to go.
And yet still the Rohingyas flee. 313,000 people have now left Myanmar's western Rakhine State since late last month. The United Nations Human Rights Chief Zaid Ra'ad al-Hussein says attacks against them may amount to crimes against humanity.
Because Myanmar has refused access to human rights investigators, the current situation cannot yet be fully assessed, but the situation remains or seems a textbook example of ethnic cleansing.
Myanmar denies it's targeting civilians and says it's been provoked by Rohingya militants who launched attacks on Myanmar border posts on August the 25th, sparking the army's crackdown against them. There have been big protests against Myanmar in Bangladesh and India. And international leaders, including Britain's Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson, are losing patience with Myanmar's leader Aung San Suu Kyi, who's yet to condemn the violence.
There can be no doubt that the treatment of the Rohingya is a disgrace, and I'm afraid it is damaging the reputation of Burma. And all of us who wish Aung San Suu Kyi well hope that she will be able to use her leadership to get the military to do the right thing for that beleaguered and oppressed minority.
A White House statement says the violent displacement of Rohingyas shows the country's security forces aren't protecting civilians. It's called on Myanmar to stop the violence and respect the rule of law. Germany says it's now suspended aid projects in Myanmar, and the Rohingyas' worsening plight is likely to be discussed at the UN Security Council tomorrow.
Anne Barker, the ABC's Anne Barker with that report. If you go to a hair salon that is a bit posh and serves you a beer or a glass of wine, well, someone could be getting the chop with the police. They are telling several barbers to cut it. A number of barbershops have been paid a visit by police in recent weeks and warned that it's illegal to give their customers alcohol because they don't have a liquor licence. Our reporter Tom Furley has more.
Having a glass of wine or a beer while getting your haircut isn't uncommon.
Certainly I have had a beer at the barbers in the past, and it just seemed to me to be a really great part of the barber experience, which is all about being relaxed, connecting, having a chat, and creating the ambience.
I have been offered one, yeah. I don't actually drink wine, so I turned it down, but I don't think there's a problem with it, to be honest.
Yeah, it's nice, it's just an added touch, and if they're able to do it legally, then it's fine.
A Central Auckland hair salon says it offers a glass of Sav or Chardonnay during the evening to provide a little bit of extra service.
I think it's just the clients enjoy, it's their time out. They come in from working all day and they get to sit down and they really enjoy the social aspect and just having their hair done and with a glass of wine to relax with.
However, those not licensed to serve alcohol could be paid a visit by their local police. A major men's barber chain was first approached in Dunedin and has been told to stop offering customers a beer when they sit in the chair. And a Central Auckland barber, who asked not to be named, says while he sometimes offered a drink to customers in the past, he's now moved his beer fridge after warnings from other barbershops.
You know, what do? You know, there's quiet outrage, but yeah, it's just a shame. It's a bloody shame. I mean, the main thing is, you know, what's going to happen to... There must be a lot of other places that supply the occasional beer, particularly in barbering and in hairdressing, that will have to have a think about how they're going to do that.
One barbershop RNZ spoke to described the crackdown as a bit stink. It had been told by other shops about the recent police visits, but planned to continue offering a tipple with its trims until it received a warning itself. An alcohol licensing lawyer and partner at Berry Simons, Andrew Braggins, says serving alcohol has become increasingly common. It was only a matter of time before it caught the attention of the authorities.
It is a little bit fraught in that obviously there's a lot of hairdressers and barbers out there that are gifting alcohol to their customers, but ultimately I think they need to be a bit careful about that. The law is pretty clear that premises can't be used as a place of resort for the consumption of alcohol, and the police and licensing inspectors could well take a dim view of shops and services providing alcohol free of charge.
The police say the issue arose after an under 18-year-old was offered a beer with his haircut. Its prevention manager, Inspector Paula Holt, said in a statement police were providing guidance to ensure shops remained within the law. As a result, some were reviewing the practice and had stopped supplying alcohol. For Checkpoint, Tom Furley.
Thanks, Tom. Lots of feedback coming in tonight, and we really appreciate it. Resave Mart. Has anyone raised the health and safety issues with IMBI, the Ministry of Business and Economic Development, or whatever the hell IMBI is an acronym for? As Labor regulator, it sounds like the company faces prosecution under the Health and Safety Work Act 2015 for not providing a safe work environment. You should seek comment from IMBI to ensure it gets their attention. Good work. Look, we did do that today. Thank you for your email. We didn't specifically go into the prosecution of the case because we are still working on it. We just asked MB for the guidelines that people operate under at work, and they very helpfully did, in fact, return to us the Health and Safety at Work General Risk and Workplace Management Regulations 2016, which do contain, and I'm just going to them now, section 4.1, using PPE to manage risk. PPE is personal protective equipment, and it says PPE should reduce exposure to a potential harm to as low as reasonably practicable and to a level needed to protect workers or others' health. So it does seem on the face of it to be covered by those 2016 regulations, but we will drill into the specifics of that. Lots of you contacting us about Save Mart tonight, including former workers and people who use the stores. We really appreciate your feedback. It's 6 o'clock.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The Labour Party is accusing National of scaremongering over its claim a water tax could sting farmers by as much as $50,000. Labour wants to charge farmers 1 or 2 cents for every 1,000 litres of water they use, though it's yet to hammer out the details. National's leader, Bill English, says various calculations suggest it could cost farmers anywhere between $10,000 and $50,000. But Labour's water spokesperson, David Parker, says that's not true.
For a fully irrigated farm, it would be around 1% or less of revenue at 2 cents per 1,000 litres. So it's plainly aimed at being a fair and affordable rate. And, the protestations from Bill English to the contrary are just scaremongering.
Labour's David Parker. Farmers are planning to protest the tax in Labour leader Jacinda Ardern's hometown of Morrinsville on Monday. Winston Peters says it's democratically outrageous the Labour Party is not revealing its policies on water charges and tax before the election. The New Zealand First Leader told several hundred people in Gisborne this afternoon it's not acceptable that Labour isn't telling voters exactly what it would do. Labour says should it win power, it will establish a working group to investigate tax settings, including extending the capital gains tax. It also plans to levy irrigators and water bottlers for water use. Mr Peters says economies like Gisborne's are based on agriculture and water use, and Labour should be upfront with the public.
Now look, I don't want to condemn good intentions or aspirationalism or being positive or being sincere, but I'd like to know before the election what the rate is. That's right. In the same way I'd like to know what the tax rate's going to be.
Winston Peters speaking in Gisborne today. The Māori Party says its botany candidate, Wetex Kang, has been cleared of a bribery allegation by the Electoral Commission. Mr Kang was investigated over allegations his campaign offered inducements on a Chinese social media message app. The Māori Party president, Tukororangi Morgan, says the Electoral Commission has confirmed Mr Kang was the victim of a smear campaign by a scorned woman he rejected as a campaign manager. Wetex Kang says his family was affected by the accusations and it could have ended his campaign for the botany seat. A worker at the Save Mart clothing store says workers have to sift barehanded through clothing bins containing soiled nappies and used syringes and are threatened with dismissal if they complain. The company has 31 stores nationwide and sells donated clothes which are collected in large blue bins. While it donates some profits to the Child Cancer Foundation, Save Mart refuses to disclose how much. A Save Mart worker who spoke to Checkpoint under condition of anonymity says workers are told they can wear gloves as they are told they can't wear gloves as it would compromise their work.
You've got used vibrators, you've got cockroaches. I've come across a dead mice once in my time, and no gloves are provided. When I first started, they said to us we weren't allowed to wear these gloves because we can't feel whether the clothing is wet.
A Save Mart worker whose voice has been altered. The company is rejecting the workers' claims and says staff are allowed to wear gloves when required. The nurse in charge of a burns victim who died under mysterious circumstances has told a coroner open bottles of insulin were kept in a drawer and were not accounted for. Heather Bills died in Middlemore Hospital in 2013, 6 weeks after she was badly burned in an explosive fire at her Orake home. The 64-year-old suffered an irreversible brain injury after being given a large dose of insulin. Sally Murphy is at the inquest into her death.
Registered nurse Harmeet Soshi, who was responsible for Heather Bill's care the night she deteriorated, said she did not give her patient insulin. She said any staff member on the ward with a swipe card would have had access to the drugs room where the insulin was kept in a fridge. Ms Sochi said open bottles that still had insulin left were kept in a top drawer and did not require records if moved. Under cross-examination, Ms Sochi was asked why she went into the drugs room that night, but there was no record of her taking anything. She said she could not recall everything, but she did not take an open bottle of insulin from the drawer. In Auckland, Sally Murphy.
Wairarapa residents will get to vote on a proposed merger of the region's 3 councils. Under the proposal, the South Wairarapa, Carterton and Masterton district councils would be replaced by a single Wairarapa district council. It would have a mayor elected at large and 12 councillors elected in 7 wards. There'd also be 5 community boards and, for at least the first term, both rural and Māori standing committees. The Local Government Commission says nearly 2,000 people in Masterton signed a petition calling for a postal vote on the proposal. It'll be held between November the 20th and December the 12th. The merger will be determined by a simple majority of votes. It's 6:05. To sport, and the loose forward Jerome Kaino is back training with the All Blacks, but he won't play against South Africa this weekend. Kaino has missed the past 3 All Black tests after returning home early from the first Bledisloe Cup match in Sydney due to personal reasons. He trained with the All Blacks today but will play for Auckland against Southland in Invercargill on Friday. The All Blacks assistant coach Ian Foster says with Kaino having been out of the game for a while, he needs to show he's in the right sort of condition to return. Meanwhile, Israel Dagg is a doubtful starter for the test as he battles an ongoing knee problem. The World Rowing Championships are set to go ahead in Florida later this month, despite Hurricane Irma ripping through the state. Local rowing officials say the Sarasota area was not badly affected and damage is limited. New Zealand's team of 13 crews is due to leave on Thursday. 3 Russian cyclists are taking legal action against the World Anti-Doping Agency after they were unable to compete at the Rio Olympics because of a ban on Russian athletes. The cyclists say they were unfairly implicated by the McLaren report, an independent study commissioned by WADA, which found evidence of state-sponsored doping. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, market research and artificial intelligence, which just might be the best way of gathering intelligence on the consumer preferences of the likes of you and me. Will the first spiritual machine be a telemarketer? Horst Feldhauser ponders the future of sales, while our military historian Damien Fenton looks back on the Italian front during the First World War. No telemarketers there. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel and the Central High Country. A few showers turning to widespread rain from Auckland southwards later tomorrow, possibly heavy in the west. Bay of Plenty, cloudy periods, isolated showers becoming widespread tomorrow evening. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mostly fine, however cloud increasing later tomorrow with scattered evening rain. Whanganui to Wellington, also Wairarapa. Isolated showers turning to widespread rain for a time tomorrow afternoon or evening. Nelson and Marlborough except the Kaikoura coast. Fine today, scattered rain tomorrow afternoon or evening. Kaikoura coast, Canterbury, Otago and Southland, cloudy periods and scattered showers. Pulatu Fiordland, isolated showers turning to widespread rain tomorrow, possibly heavy. And the Chatham Islands, cloudy with occasional showers, possibly heavy today with hail. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks very much indeed, Katrina. Lots happening in this half hour, and we're just going to begin and then return to it with breaking news on the News Hub poll. So the Colmar-Brunton, which is the TVNZ poll, had Labour in front. The News Hub poll, which is the TV3 poll, has National in front, and the Nat's up 4 to 47.3. Labour down 1.6 to 37.8. The Greens bang on the threshold at 4.9. Remember, you need 5 or an electorate seat to get into Parliament. That's down 1.2. And New Zealand First at 6, down 0.6. We're going to go to Bryce Edwards for some analysis of a really good poll for the Nats after a couple of pretty unpleasant ones for them. This is fascinating, but before we get Bryce on the phone as he crunches the numbers and considers what it all means, let's go back momentarily to Florida, where residents are beginning to return home as the extent of the damage from Hurricane Irma becomes clear. Every major city in the state has been affected and more than 6 million homes and businesses are without power. City streets are underwater from Orlando and Jacksonville into coastal Georgia and South Carolina, especially hard hit with the resort islands of the Florida Keys, where officials say 10,000 people may have to be evacuated and bodies are expected to be found amongst the debris. The BBC's Irma Makbul has been in Florida covering the storm and its aftermath.
After a day of darkness and fury, Miami opened its eyes to the aftermath. This city is now littered with the hurricane's debris. Boats were even lifted clean out of the bay and dumped on the shore. People here are emerging from their shelters and barricaded homes to try to start clearing up.
So you got out this morning and what did you find?
Sheer devastation everywhere you look. I mean, the parking lot is still flooded, cars, trees falling down.
In spite of all the preparation for the storm, millions are now without power. This city's financial district has been badly affected. It was underwater during the hurricane, inundated with massive coastal waves as Irma passed. And across the city and the state, transformers were blown up by the rains, plunging people into darkness. But of course, the impact of this storm has been felt far beyond Miami. The big concern has been about the Florida Keys. Well, because of damage to roads in some of the more remote parts of the Florida Keys, they can still only be surveyed by air, and we still can't land on some of the Keys too. But this is where Hurricane Irma hit first in Florida, and it's where some of the worst damage could be. Although people living in the Keys have become used to hurricanes, when Irma was reported as the most powerful ever recorded in the Atlantic, most got to safer land. Many are now still unable to return to their damaged homes. From some places in the Keys there has been access to, it appears the hurricane utterly ravaged houses and belongings. And that goes for the mainland too. In the city of Naples, in the west of the state, petrol stations and mobile homes were torn apart. Fort Lauderdale saw tornadoes as Irma came through. Parts of the beach were whipped into the city. Though even as the storm was still affecting this area, looters took advantage. With millions told to evacuate and so many in shelters, there was little to stop them. And new places are still being affected. In recent hours, Jacksonville in northern Florida was hit by a massive storm surge, flooding the city. They said the impact of Irma would be widespread, and it has been.
It certainly has been. It's Irma Makbul. The scope of the damage in Florida, though, still pales in comparison with the utter devastation left by Irma, which hit parts of the Caribbean as a Category 5 storm, full force, killing nearly 40 people, at least 10 of them in Cuba, and doing massive damage in countries with very little resources to rebuild with. It's 12 minutes past 6. As we said just before Alim's piece, a News Hub Read Research poll out tonight shows National has rebounded 47 points. That's up 4 in the News Hub poll and 10 points ahead of Labour, which is down 1.6 to 37.8. The poll has New Zealand First sitting unchanged on 6%. That's down about 0.6, down 0.5%. The Greens are bang on the 5% threshold. We're actually 4.9, but that's down 1.2. The poll also has National leader Bill English ahead as preferred Prime Minister on 33.1. Labour leader Jacinda Ardern just behind him on 31.7. Joining us now is political scientist, political commentator, and I've just made this up, Bryce, political bibliographer, Dr. Bryce Edwards. Are you there?
I am here, John.
Nice to talk to you. So Colmar Brunton had Labour in front, News Hub, and what is it, Read Research. They have National in front by 10 points. Is this volatile? Is it the electorate? Are some people not answering the phone on Tuesdays and answering them on Thursday? What's going on, do you think, Bryce?
I think when we look back at this campaign in the future, we'll think of volatility. As you just said, this is just showing how volatile things are, because no one was expecting that National would be so far ahead. Most people thought Labour would be ahead in this poll. So to be 10 points ahead is just astonishing. And it shows that this election is still in the balance. They're still close, because once you add in New Zealand First, Labour could still govern under this scenario. But it's a surprising poll.
Yeah, so you had 37.86, the Greens 4.9, so you'd need the Greens to get 5, right? Or you'd need the Greens to cross the threshold, but that's margin of error stuff with them sitting there at 4.9.
Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly.
The really interesting thing is that actually the move on the last News Hub poll isn't that radical. It's the switch from the last Colmar-Brunton. I mean, this tells a completely different story, and what that suggests perhaps is there's a whole lot of undecided voters who are still moving around.
Absolutely, and it shows that the messaging that National's putting out does seem to be working. So we've had these Joyce, complaints about the missing $12 billion in Labour's, alternative budget. We're seeing a lot of questions about Labour's vagueness on tax, and it seems that it probably is worrying voters. And Labour's going to be under pressure now, I think, after seeing this poll, to come out and give a bit more detail about where they would be going with a capital gains tax or with a land tax, because that vagueness just isn't working for them.
And that would suggest that Joyce's narrative, as derisory as people have been around that $11.7 billion hole, has at some level been successful, which, whatever you think of the economics, has worked for him as a political attack.
Yeah, and that line was, I think most economists would agree, a nonsense, but he won't back down on it. And because I think he knows it works, that if you keep throwing mud, some of it will stick. And so that's what we're seeing in this poll tonight, that Labour's credentials as economic managers are their big Achilles heel in this. And yeah, those swing voters or those undecideds that are coming to make decisions now are a bit wary of Labour and those economic changes.
Gosh, this is fascinating, isn't it? It's really interesting also that there is a sense that a lot of people are going to vote early this year. The Electoral Commission is suggesting, there may be record numbers of people voting early. They obviously are the people who've made their mind up. But the people who vote on the Saturday, good old-fashioned polling day, they are still clearly thinking about what they're going to do, aren't they?
That's right, and maybe there is a benefit in holding off till Saturday because, strategically you might want to change the way you vote. Even if you prefer one party over another, there will be a lot of, interesting scenarios going on over the next 2 weeks. And it's the Green Party in particular that will be incredibly worried about this poll. And Labour will be too, because they know that at some stage Labour's going to have to, I think, give the Greens a bit more of a shot in the arm by a bit more endorsement, or else try and kill them off, because Labour can't really afford to have the Greens coming in at 4.9% and, soaking up all those votes, those left-wing votes, but ultimately being wasted votes.
Dr. Bryce Edwards, absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you joining us tonight. So the Nats on 47.3, up 4. Labour on 37.8, down 1.6. But remember, last week the Colmar-Brunton had Labour in front, 17 minutes past 6. There are growing calls for more beds to help rehabilitate addicts in Tauranga and the Western Bay of Plenty. The Bay of Plenty District Health Board says there are no residential drug and alcohol rehabilitation facilities in the district, aside from a single detox bed in Whakatane Hospital. And even moving to another region doesn't necessarily help. One mother says her son has been waiting 6 months for treatment, despite moving to Auckland in a bid to speed up the process. Joe O'Brien reports.
A Tauranga mother whose son has addiction and mental health issues is among those calling for rehabilitation beds in the city. Her son moved to Auckland to improve his chances on the waiting list for a residential treatment bed, as there are only a limited number of spaces for people from outside the region.
He has to reside in Auckland, so he had to move from my support in Tauranga to Auckland, which is really expensive to even get on the wait list.
The woman, who asked not to be identified, says addicts like her son can relapse while they're waiting for residential treatment.
He can still use while he's waiting, making more mental health issues and anxiety, depression, and not to mention stress on the family.
She says her son's now been waiting 6 months for a bed.
Horrific. My son wants to give up. He just wants some action. He wants some help, and he's just not getting it. And they'll turn around and say, oh, well, there's help in the community. You can go to NA or AA, but if you're unwell, they need residential treatment.
It's a familiar story to Erin Scarlett O'Neill, the founder of Brave Hearts, a support group for families of meth addicts in Tauranga. She says the lack of beds makes it difficult for families to be there for loved ones as they try to break the habit.
It does, because families need to be involved in the recovery, and it means travel for families then either to Hamilton or Auckland or wherever their loved one is, so that they can be part of the process.
Labour's Bay of Plenty candidate Angie Warren-Clark, who is also the manager of Tauranga Women's Refuge, says she's seeing more and more families affected by synthetics, methamphetamine and alcohol.
Our most prevalent drug is alcohol, and we certainly do have a culture of binging in this community, but certainly what I'm seeing is methamphetamine is out of control and people are absolutely addicted. Their life is being absolutely disrupted.
Angie Warren-Clark says Tauranga needs a residential rehabilitation service and a supported living environment for people re-entering the community after treatment.
It's very lacking in our community. It's what I'm hearing from a lot of people. People deserve the right to be able to rehab in our own community.
The Bay of Plenty MP, National's Todd Muller, says it's not a case of Tauranga missing out, as 36 providers already work in the addiction sector. But he agrees consideration should be given to providing rehab beds for the city's growing population.
As the community grows, the opportunity is significant here, but people are complex and communities are complex, and we have those who are struggling. And we've got to make sure that as we grow, our services respond to that need.
National has promised $40 million over 4 years for drug treatment and education, including 1,500 more inpatient places. Todd Muller says his understanding is some of the extra funding is earmarked for the Western Bay of Plenty, and he believes some of that should go towards rehab beds.
I can't, as the backbench MP for Bay of Plenty, say that it's definitely going to happen, but what I can say is that this is a government that has a track record of increasing investment in this area. Having a rehabilitation option for addicted people in Tauranga needs to be part of that mix.
The Bay of Plenty District Health Board says it has contracts for residential addiction services with providers in Auckland, Hamilton, Rotorua, Hawke's Bay and Christchurch, and has access to methamphetamine treatment beds across the country. It says most DHBs do not have residential treatment. For Checkpoint, ko Joe O'Brien tēnei.
Voting forms are going out in Australia today to start an 8-week national survey on legalising same-sex marriage. The form has one question: should the law be changed to allow same-sex couples to marry? Many who want same-sex marriage are opposed to the postal ballot, which is expensive and non-binding. It's an issue Australians can't seem to sort out and have been debating for years. The Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull is in favour, as is opposition Labour leader Bill Shorten. But the survey has reignited fierce debate between opponents and supporters. This report from the BBC Sydney correspondent.
It's a vote few wanted, but all are desperate to win. Many gay couples feel their private relationship shouldn't be the subject of a national public survey. But after legal challenges failed, Australia's 8-week postal ballot is going ahead. For Natalie and Lauren, a yes vote would mean a chance to choose what their relationship can become.
Simply put, it means we can get married when we're ready. Right now, obviously we can't, and that's kind of really sad and heartbreaking just because we have matching genitalia.
School told my son he could wear a dress next year if he felt like it.
The No campaign is every bit as forthright. It argues legalising same-sex marriage would have a wider impact. Accused of focusing on issues which aren't on the ballot paper, campaigners say they have to take a stand against wider social change.
Education, of course it comes into education. If this is a legalised relationship as a marriage, well, it would be discrimination for that not to be taught in schools. And then broader than that, it affects religious freedom, but it also affects freedom of choice and freedom of conscience.
There may be 8 weeks before the voting ends, but the debate is already loud and heated. Unlike most elections in Australia, voting isn't compulsory, and so both sides have to mobilise people, give them a reason to care and take part.
If there's one institution Sydney-siders really do care about, it's brunch. This is where friends and families can debate and disagree. It's where opinions are formed and decisions made. So how are people here planning to vote?
I'll only tell you what I'm voting, and I'm voting no.
Well, I'll be voting yes. It's unfortunate we've got to this where we have to have a vote. I think it's great, and I think we should have equality. So, yeah, absolutely.
Marriage is between a man and a woman, has been for a long time. I have nothing against their getting together, but they just need a new word, and it can't be marriage.
Yes, if they want to get married, why not?
Opinion polls suggest the Yes campaign has the numbers to win. The government's pledged to change by Christmas if a majority approves. But with so much at stake, neither side is taking anything for granted.
That report from the BBC correspondent, extraordinary to hear Australia going through all of that. 6:24. Lots of feedback tonight on Kids Can and the school lunches, and of course Save Mart and the conditions that those workers told us they were working in. Thank you everyone who's contacted us. This is about school lunches and Kids Can, which we've reported on Friday and again today. I'm concerned, while most clearly are concerned by children going hungry at school and by infants home, we are too often appeased by charities stepping in where society as a whole in the form of government should. Charity is being treated as a form of taxation. It's born of the same broken market decides concept that is heading the developed world to disaster. Great report, but what about the rest of the kids at school that are missing out around the whole of New Zealand? Keep on. That is the real story. Our kids must be fed at school and we should pay for this as a nation, but chips and biscuits are more expensive than healthy food. Parents need to be taught this and how to budget. Thank you all. So much feedback coming in tonight. We really do appreciate hearing from you. We were most taken by this story. If you've been watching or listening to the entire program, you will have heard Bridget Burke's report about Florida and surrounds referring to it. We liked it so much we actually gave the woman a call. Florida, Hurricane Irma. Most evacuees fled with their pets if they could, or left their animals in whatever shelter was available. Neither of those options was available for Florida student Tatton Fisher. As the winds picked up and up, Tatton could see the family's barn under threat. And because she was running out of options to protect her horses, she brought Goose and Dixie's pregnant, inside her concrete home, converting the laundry into a stable so they could ride out the storm in comfort. Now, the video of the two horses being walked through and around the house has now been viewed more than 2 million times, only been up a day or two. The numbers growing very fast. There is something incredibly charming about seeing two horses being led through the house. Tatton's pretty low-key about it. And she called me Sir, which is very nice. But we called her this afternoon and we asked her, first of all, just so we could hear her say the name of the place, where she lived.
Okeechobee, Florida.
And what's Okeechobee like? Describe it to us.
It's nothing. It's like a little redneck town.
And have you lived, you don't sound like a redneck. Have you lived there all your life?
Yes, sir.
Tatton, who had the idea of bringing the horses inside?
I did. I mean, it's the safest place on our property, so, and they're like family.
And with the horses getting a bit upset, could you see they were distressed?
No, they were fine. They actually, like today, once we brought them outside, they wanted to come back in.
And so what was the weather doing?
It was nasty. There was the Hurricane Irma, and the winds were crazy. It blew the roof right off our barn.
Wow. And so you thought, I'm getting the horses in?
Yes, sir.
And
brought them right in our laundry room.
And have you ever had them inside before?
No.
And what did they do in there?
They just hung out. I mean, it was just like them being in the stall. They loved it. They got 24-hour attention.
And then you put the images up online, and now you're doing interviews everywhere. The pictures have gone totally global. You're talking to Radio New Zealand, which I suspect you didn't expect. It just makes people happy, doesn't it?
sir.
Can you describe Irma as she was going through? What was Irma like?
It was pretty scary. Not gonna lie, I was scared. It was loud, lots of wind, tornadoes everywhere. But we rode it out.
Yeah, you did. And how's the damage to your property?
I mean, we lost a couple of, of the sheds and the pastures for the horses, and the roof came off our barn. But other than that, everybody made it out safe.
And where are the horses? What are Goose and Dixie doing now?
They're hanging out in the pasture, trying to get back in the house.
Did they watch TV or anything, or they just stayed in the laundry room?
They just stayed in the laundry room.
Have you got electricity back on there?
No, it's probably going to be about a week or two before we get anything.
Wow, that's a long time, isn't it? So there's really serious damage to power lines all around you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. If my children are listening, that's respect, you little buggers. Thank you for being with us on Checkpoint for tonight. Taryn Fisher talking about her horses and surviving Irma with them inside the house. We really appreciate your company on Checkpoint. On behalf of our really excellent team, we hope to see you again tomorrow night at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The National Party has surged back in front of Labour in the latest News Hub Reid research poll. The Labour Party is accusing National of scaremongering over its claim a water tax could sting farmers by as much as $50,000. And an addiction expert is warning of more unexpected deaths of people using synthetic substances because doctors don't know how to treat them. Our next news and weather is at 7.
The making of Neil Finn's latest album was a community event that anyone in the world could effectively be part of. I'm Nick Bollinger and I'll be reviewing Neil Finn's Out of Silence in the Sampler. And I'll be talking to Chicago-based singer-songwriter Robbie Fulks about Nashville, banjos and Thelonious Monk.
We sat down and we got fed.
That's in the Sampler tonight at 7:30. Part of Nights on RNZ National.